Dr. Baro, would you still say that Dr. Manmohan Singh is somebody you consider a friend? When was the last time you spoke to him?
Well, I spoke to him on the phone
Recently?
on his last birthday. I cannot use the word friend.
He was your boss.
He was my boss. He was my mentor. And ironically, when I left the Prime Minister's office, in August 2008, he gave me a farewell lunch to which he invited, everybody, the Cabinet Secretary, Finance Secretary, RBI Governor, Monte Ahluwalia, a whole lot of people, including K. Subramaniam. And at the end of the lunch, he kind of gave a mini farewell speech in which I was quite taken aback when he said, Sanjaya and I have been partners. Today you have people saying that he should have resigned when Rahul Gandhi tore up the Ordinance. So that's what I said then. In fact, a very senior person within the system said to me, I don't want to name the person, that I would have got your job in the Prime Minister's office, but for the fact that once you wrote that book, Modi will never tolerate a journalist around him.
Do you believe that you did not get a second stint in the government of UPA II because the Gandhis did not like you? The most controversial aspect of your book was the suggestion that you said should have been publicly known anyway, that Sonia Gandhi had a key say in government policy.
Well, that was because Arnab Goswami, our dear friend in the media, chose to focus on that in the very first interview that he did with me on the day my book came out. And then that was deliberately picked up by the BJP and distorted to suggest that I had said files were shown to Sonia. And I had to immediately go on television later saying the book doesn't say it. So there was this complaint, and clearly the complaint was conveyed to the Prime Minister. So Manmohan Singh called me and said, look, why don't you go and explain to Sonia Gandhi? So I said to him, sir, I'm here because of you. You gave me this job, so I'm here. I'm not because of her. So whatever explanation I have to give, I'll give it to you. I'm not meeting any second person to give explanation. If he had come back in 2009 to the Lok Sabha
as an elected
member of parliament, I tell you, history would have been different. The opposition stands firm, and here I think the one hope for the opposition, frankly, and I say this, given my past views, was Bharat Jodo Yatra, which has given Rahul Gandhi a credibility that he did not have.
Dr. Baro, would you still say that Dr. Manmohan Singh is somebody you consider a friend? When was the last time you spoke to him?
Well, I spoke to him on the phone.
Recently?
On his last birthday. I had made it a point for every birthday to call and wish him. And this year he couldn't come on the phone. He was not well that day. That is September 2022. I couldn't speak to him on the phone. But September 2021 I did. I cannot use the word friend.
He was your boss.
He was my boss. He was my mentor. And ironically, when I left the Prime Minister's office, in August 2008, he gave me a farewell lunch to which he invited, everybody, the Cabinet Secretary, Finance Secretary, RBI Governor, Monte Ahluwalia, a whole lot of people, including K. Subramaniam. And at the end of the lunch, he kind of gave a mini farewell speech in which I was quite taken aback when he said, Sanjaya and I have been partners. So he didn't use the word friend, but he used the word partner.
I ask you this question because after you wrote the book that you did about your time in the Prime Minister's office, there was a sense that he stopped talking to you.
He certainly, his views I value. And he was unhappy. But then he knew what I was doing. You know, I don't know if I mentioned this to you when we've discussed the book in the past. When the book was finally over, I went and saw him.
Before it was published?
Before it was published. And I told him that I've written this book. And I then quoted Mao Zedong, who said that no person is 100% perfect. But if somebody is 70% good and 30% bad, it's all right. So I quoted Mao and said to him that you will be 80% happy with my book, 20% unhappy. So which is better than the Mao Zedong ratio of 70-30.
Yeah.
And he smiled and, he didn't ask me. In fact, a week after that, I ran into Mrs. Manmohan Singh at a wedding. I think Kishore Ahluwalia and Meghna Desai's son's wedding reception at the Delhi Golf Club. And she saw me and said, "Tumhara kitab kab aa raha hai?" I said, the date had not been decided. This would have been March or so, when I was not even thinking about the date of publication. Then she said, title kya hai? I said, Accidental Prime Minister. Arey wah, badhiya title choose kiya tumne. And, people were there. Ravinder Kaur, Surjit's wife was there. Kishore was there. Ishar Ahluwalia was there. So I kind of took it. They know the book is coming out. They know what the title is. So I thought it was okay. And since, as you know, you read the book, we've discussed it many times. It is 80% a endorsement of his leadership. But it is also 20% criticism because of the kind of things he was willing to tolerate. Today you have people saying that he should have resigned when Rahul Gandhi tore up the Ordinance. Well, that's what I said then, right? But now I hear many congressmen making that point. And in fact, when Rahul finally did the Bharat Jodo Yatra, a lot of people said that he has finally lived down the memory of the Ordinance steering. That was the negative memory. Yeah. And finally, with Bharat Jodo Yatra, he had kind of overcome that, right? So I think there was a recognition that was a wrong thing.
One of the points you made when the accidental Prime Minister came out is that you said that people outside of the power circles, who don't know how power operates, how power is wielded, found the book an eye-opener. But the people inside the power circle said, Sanjay, how could you have done this? They saw the book as a betrayal. When you look back, is there anything you would have done differently?
No, in fact, this is what I wrote another book called India's Power Elite, Caste, Class and Cultural. And I begin that book by saying this, that what the Delhi Darbar was used to, and I must confess, even today is used to, with this new power dispensation regime, Modi's visit, is that when you are inside, nobody outside should know what is happening inside. In fact, a very senior person within the system said to me, I don't want to name the person, that, I would have got your job in the Prime Minister's office, but for the fact that once you wrote that book, Modi will never tolerate a journalist around him. And this was someone who was aspiring for the media advisor's job. So I think it's in the nature of the Delhi Darbar that those who are inside do not want the outside world to know how it functions. And I think what the accidental Prime Minister did was to show how the inside of a system works. And I'm not surprised that there was so much negative reaction from inside the system, which is exactly the opposite of the reaction from outside the system. It's all very long back, 9 years back, but for a year or so after that book came out, it was impossible for me to go anywhere without being recognized and selfies being taken. Thanks to all of you who put me on television. I remember going to Dasara Pandal in this place, Chitto Park, and everyone was coming and taking selfies. Airports. So it had become a kind of a public celebration of the fact that you've written this book.
Well, about the fact that you have shone a light on the somewhat awkward power equation that existed with Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister and Sonia Gandhi as the Congress leader. Now, yes, it was 9 years ago, but some of the questions raised about the dualism of that power arrangement are relevant to the Congress's fortunes even today. And, the Congress has an elected president, but there are many people who believe that he could not have been elected without the blessings of the Gandhi family. Even today, there's no government for the Congress, but the sense is that all key decisions are not taken by Mallikarjun Kharge, they are taken by the Gandhi family. So that dualism and what it could result in remains a relevant question. Do you believe that you did not get a second stint in the government of UPA II because the Gandhis did not like you?
Well, I don't know. And what I
do
believe,
the Gandhis like you?
Frankly, I don't know.
Do you like the Gandhis?
No, it's not a question of like. I'll tell you. Barkha,
Professionally.
it's not about like.
Professionally.
No,
I'm
it's
not
not
actually
about,
making a facile comment.
It's not about like or dislike. In fact, if you go back, I have a fairly detailed discussion both in the accidental Prime Minister and in the book 1991, which I wrote about Narasimha Rao,
Right.
about the history of the relationship between Congress President and Prime Minister. It goes back a long way. It began with Jawaharlal Nehru. When Nehru was Prime Minister, Acharya Kripalani was Congress President. And Acharya Kripalani said to Nehru that, look, you should keep me informed. I'm the party, you're the government. You should keep me informed what's happening. And Nehru said, forget it. I take an oath of office, an oath of secrecy. I cannot tell you unless you join my government. So come in as a minister without portfolio and sit in the cabinet meetings. Then you'll know what we are discussing. But otherwise, till a decision of the government is made public, I cannot share it with you merely because you're Congress president. And Acharya Kripalani finally resigned. But this whole issue of the relationship between head of government and head of party began with Nehru and Kripalani. And I've put it all in writing to give the context. The problem was that with the communist parties, traditionally, not just in India, but Soviet Union and China, the party president was always the boss. And in fact, the head of government was answerable to the party president. I mean, Brezhnev, Mao Zedong, party general secretaries. Who was president of China was irrelevant. Because now it's different with Xi Jinping having all the jobs, right? And the CPM, when it came to power in Bengal, Pramod Dasgupta was the party president. Jyoti Basu was the chief minister. Jyoti Basu had to go every day and report to Pramod Dasgupta what he was up to. And Sitaram Yechury gave this as an example to Sonia Gandhi and to Manmohan Singh, saying this is how, so it was a model adopted by the Congress from the communists. Now, of course, today people say, but that's what is happening, that the BJP government of Modi is answerable to the RSS. And RSS is the shadow.
But I don't think that's true actually in the Modi government's case.
Well, whether it's true or not, people say that.
You've had past examples in the Vajpayee government where the RSS, for example, has vetoed the choice of a finance minister, as we all remember. But in the Modi government, you could possibly argue that Modi has transcended the RSS.
Yeah, but again, I don't know what happens inside the government, but I'm telling you the view perception outside is that the RSS is very much in the room. I mean, recently there was a news report that Prime Minister Modi met with Amit Shah, JP Nadda and an RSS functionary. 4 of them sat for several hours to discuss obviously various issues relating to government and party. So there is an RSS presence. Whether they have the last word or not, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that a lot of people today say that why were you criticizing the Congress? Of course, today look at what is happening. That is said of many parties. I mean, Shiv Sena in the old days...
would go to Bala Sahib who had the remote
control. Bala Sahib had the remote control, right? So, the question really is, what is the context in which that particular thing was being said?
The most controversial aspect of your book was the suggestion that you said should have been publicly known anyway, that Sonia Gandhi had a key say in government policy. And to that extent, what was officially the business of government was, in a sense, conveyed to her, ferried to her. They were called secret files. But as you said, it didn't actually mean that a physical file was carried from the Prime Minister's office to 10 Janpath. But you spoke about the official Pulak Chatterjee, who was the kind of go-between. It created a major, major outcry at the time.
Well, that was because Arnab Goswami, our dear friend in the media, chose to focus on that in the very first interview that he did with me on the day my book came out. And then that was deliberately picked up by the BJP and distorted to suggest that I had said files were shown to Sonia. And I had to immediately go on television later saying the book doesn't say it. And of course the book doesn't say it.
But the book does say that she had a say in policy.
No. Look, they're two different things. That's very important. Government files come under the Official Secrets Act. And therefore, for anybody outside government, which is the issue that Nehru addressed to Kripalani, anyone in government to show a file to someone outside would be contravening the Official Secrets Act. That is an illegal activity. But for a policy to be discussed, let's say Narega, okay? The government says we are planning to do this. Let's discuss what we should be doing with the party. That nothing illegal in that. But I think the real issue here was that these daily meetings of Pulok with Mrs. Gandhi happened, and nobody has denied that. I know they were happening. And more importantly, a lot of key positions you had to qualify by appearing for a virtual interview. I mean, I know this for a fact. Let me, I think I've said it in the book. I now can't remember. I mean, it's so long.
Say it again.
There was a point about 6 months down the line after I joined government. I joined government in June, right? So around September, October, not even 6 months, there was a campaign saying that I should be fired. What triggered, incidentally, I mean, you would be interested in knowing this, was the composition of the media delegation that went with the Prime Minister when he went to the UN in September 2004, right? So I picked names on the basis of, which is important newspaper, important magazine, important journalist. And I was accused of not having included any pro-Congress journalists in that list.
Who was accusing you?
Congress, I mean, people around, both in the media. People from our own Biradari went and... So there was this complaint, and clearly the complaint was conveyed to the Prime Minister. So Manmohan Singh called me and said, look, why don't you go and explain to Sonia Gandhi? So I said to him, sir, I'm here because of you. You gave me this job, so I'm here. I'm not because of her. So whatever explanation I have to give, I'll give it to you. I'm not meeting any second person to give explanation. So I drew the line within the first 3 months.
And he allowed you to draw that line?
He allowed. So, I mean, that is the fact. So, I mean...
Do you think Sonia Gandhi held that against you?
May have. I don't care. But the point is, others would have gone. And I know, I don't want to name names, but I know several senior ministers and functionaries, in order to get the job they were getting, had to kind of appear for a informal or a formal interview.
And that's the point, right? Whether files went or not physically, a Prime Minister's office official did meet with Sonia Gandhi on a daily basis, on a regular basis. Government policy was discussed. There was clearly not just interference, but a direct say in government policy, even through the NAC, the National Advisory Council that, today doesn't exist. Do you believe that Manmohan Singh allowed himself to be diminished repeatedly? Was there that one point where you feel like it began and then it couldn't stop? Where just like you drew the wall and you put the shutter down and you said, I'll answer to you, I won't answer to her. What was that one point when Dr. Singh did that to himself?
Well, again, I mean, we are now going back into the distant past. I've written 5 books after that. I don't like going back and talking about that book. Let me be very honest. It's not something I like to talk about anymore. But since we are here and you are...
Why is that though? Why does it feel like a part of your past you don't want to revisit?
It was not something that I want to any longer think about.
Okay.
I've moved on. The country has moved on and I have moved on. So I don't think it's something that I want to talk about much. In fact, I didn't come here...
No, I'm not going to talk only about that, but let's...
But I'll tell you the point where I think the turning point. And this is there in the book. When he had the... when the elections were coming, 2009, I was in Singapore. I flew down to see him when he had an operation. And I said to him, sir, these elections are coming. Either because of health, you don't continue for a second term, or you contest for the Lok Sabha. And I've said this in the book that, when he said, oh, but my health is not in a good shape, I can't contest. I said, you don't have to contest. I mean, look, your reputation in the country. He was at a high. Singh is king.
Yeah. After the nuclear deal.
Yeah, after the nuclear deal. I said, you become a candidate in Amritsar, you will sweep the election. And all you need to do is have Mrs. Kaur go and campaign. Yeah. Let her campaign on your behalf. So in fact, Mrs. Kaur was sitting there. She said, "Ha, bilkul main karungi. I can campaign." So that would have been the turning point. If he had come back in 2009 to the Lok Sabha
as an elected member of parliament, I tell you, history would have been different. It is that decision not to come into the Lok Sabha, the party's decision not to send him to the Lok Sabha, to keep him in the Rajya Sabha, and then for him to continue into a second term, which I think was the turning point. That's very interesting, and I tend to agree, because the power that you can legitimately claim as an elected member is very different.
In fact, let me also add finally, and then this will be the last thing I'll say on this book. I came in June 2009, again from Singapore, to congratulate him on the victory. The results had come, he had been re-elected. So I flew down to, congratulate him. And I went to 3 Racecourse Road, which is now Lok Kalyan Marg. And June heat, we walked from 3 to 5 to 7. And it's quite a walk, down the road. In that heat, around about 10 or 10:30 in the morning. And I said to him, as he walked, I said, sir, I mean, you're in such good shape after all that campaigning and the operation and all that. So he said, I was willing to give my life for the campaign. Yeah, I mentioned this in the book. So here was a man who was so cocky that he had won the election. I'm willing to give my life for the victory, which was his phrase. But he should have contested the Lok Sabha.
Yeah.
And everybody, then I went back to Singapore, and Rajdeep Sardesai called me. And he said, he didn't know I was in Delhi. He said, so you're sitting in Singapore and seeing all these things. What is your view? So I said to him, this is Manmohan Singh's victory. So he said, oh, you say that, Mr. Baru, but people here are giving credit to Rahul Gandhi and to Sonia Gandhi. So I said, yeah, I know that's how the party would react, but I would give the full credit to him. And then he was in Congress headquarters, Akbar Road. So with the camera, and this is all live. Prithviraj Chavan was there. So he went to Prithviraj and said, Sanjay thinks that the victory credit should go to Dr. Manmohan Singh. What do you say? So Prithviraj said, yes, the credit should go to Sonia ji, to Rahul ji, and to Manmohan Singh ji. That was the beginning of the end, I thought.
Yeah. Let's move beyond the book, but actually look at the present. What intrigues me, and I'm sure it having been on the inside of government, and also, as you said, then written a book, about India's new elite, as it were. How do we understand our own country? We look at these two men, Prime Minister Modi and Dr. Manmohan Singh. They could not be more different. They could not be more different in persona. They could not be more different in how they think. They could not be more different in how they communicate. And yet, both have been, at one point, extremely popular leaders. Dr. Manmohan Singh, going into 2009, was the official prime ministerial candidate of the Congress party, and people voted him back.
Correct.
Manmohan Singh sort of never probably capitalized or was able to build on that popularity, and UPA II was a debacle. Prime Minister Modi has not had that debacle. But how do we understand politics and political communication in particular? And this is a space that is your forte. When both of these men coexist almost like back to back in our polity, how do we understand their popularity?
Well, I think today Dr. Manmohan Singh's popularity is largely also due to the frustration of a lot of people with the
There's a nostalgia now for him.
There is nostalgia. I think he was right when he said history will judge me kindly. And history will judge him kindly because of the kind of politics that we see in this country. I think there's a lot of regression in the political culture. But the India of today is very different from the India of that time. The fact is
It's only been a decade.
I know. It's a significant decade. It's a significant decade because the slow communalization of northern India, and essentially is of northern India. The BJP has still not made its dent into non-Hindi India, from Bengal to Orissa to Andhra Pradesh to Tamil Nadu to Kerala to Telangana. Karnataka was in and out. It's a Hindi India. And even in Maharashtra, it's all, fudging. It's a stealing of a mandate. So Gujarat has become part of this Hindi India. Now, the communalization of this part of India has been long happening. I think now there are several books which have been written and they all trace it back to the Rama Janmabhoomi movement from Advani and Vajpayee's time. And Congress lost UP long back. Though Manmohan Singh was in power for 10 years, Congress, UP was not with the Congress party, right? Bihar was not with the Congress party. And Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan have been with the Congress, but BJP and Congress are equally positioned. So I think the drift to where we are today was over a period of time. The change, I think, is the disaster of UPA II. Frankly, it's the vacuum created between 2012 and 2014, those 2 years. That really opened up an opportunity for a tough leader. And Narendra Modi exploited that. He first staged a coup within his own party by ejecting Advani and Murli Manohar Joshi and the old leadership out, Jaswant Singh. All of them were ejected. Only Sushma Swaraj was tolerated, but finally she was also ejected. Poor Arun Jaitley passed away, but maybe he would have also been ejected at some point. So we have a reconstitution of the power relationships within the party. But don't forget, in the run-up to the 2019 election, almost all the projections showed a declining popularity for the BJP. And then you had Pulwama. And a narrative was built around that ensured the victory. Once again, in the last 1 year, if you see, there's declining popularity of this government. There's growing concern about the economy and about joblessness, etc. But again, you will have, a variety of means used. Right now in Maharashtra, for example, the Enforcement Directorate and the CBI and the anti-corruption charges have been used to stitch together a government. So you have a vulnerable opposition. That's a fact.
I was just going to say that in many ways, there's that or kaun hai factor continues to prevail in the minds of many voters that I meet on my travels. And while you do make an important point about the communalization of the Hindi belt, as it were, I find that a lot of people might vote for Modi for Hindutva, but a lot of people also vote for him despite Hindutva. You will also have this kind of people. And by the way, especially after UPA II, you had many public intellectuals who criticize him today who supported him. So do you think it's oversimplification to say that Modi equals Hindutva and that's why his success?
So 30% of the electorate, which is solidly with the BJP, is the Hindutva vote, right? And that for them, it is the Hindu leader. And you can see it. Look at the reaction to that press conference in Washington or to Barack Obama's statement. Where did that reaction come from? It's come from this base. There is a base. And the base is now on autopilot. Nobody has to sit in Delhi and tell them, okay, get on with it on Twitter. There's a solid communalized base. The fight is for the additional 5 or 6 or 8% that actually defines the victory, right? So even historically, if you see what Rajni Kothari called during the Congress system, Congress had a solid base, which was close to 40%. Shrunk over a period of time, but took a long time for them to be voted out of office, because even with the 30% vote, Congress was coming back to power. It's only when that vote went down to 20% that Congress lost power, right? Now, I don't see BJP vote going down to 20% in the near future. So there were 30% vote. But that 30% vote, because it's concentrated in northern India, will deliver a certain number of seats, but cannot deliver absolute majority. So there is still a battle on for that additional 5, 6, 7% that may have deserted Modi in 2019 but for Pulwama, and you whip up nationalism. That may be deserting him now but for the way in which the BJP is weakening the opposition. I think it's a huge test right now for the next 6 months. Is a huge test for the opposition. You see what happened in Maharashtra, the way in which the NCP has been broken.
Possibly with Sharad Pawar's blessings, though.
Why did he need his blessings? 25th of June, Prime Minister goes to Bhopal and says there's a 72,000 crore corruption scam of the NCP. He gave a figure. He said, the most corrupt fellows, NCP. 25th June. 2nd July, they're part of your government. So, what is this anti-corruption campaign about? So, the fact is that you're arm twisting various parties who are capable of being arm twisted, because, everybody has some
skeleton.
As I once famously told a very senior politician, is hammam mein sab nange hain, right? That's true. So that could weaken the opposition. But I think if the opposition stands firm, and here I think the one hope for the opposition, frankly, and I say this, given my past views, was Bharat Jodo Yatra, which has given Rahul Gandhi a credibility that he did not have.
Have you changed your mind about Rahul Gandhi?
Oh, absolutely. Bharat Jodo Yatra, I think, was a turning point. In any democracy, a politician that is finally able to connect to even 10% of the electorate, forget, 50%, 40%. If we are able to connect, why do we respect politicians in a democracy? We respect politicians in a democracy because they're able to connect to people.
You don't think the Prime Minister connects to people?
Of course he connects to people, but I don't like his politics. That's a different issue. I'm not denying his popular mandate. All I'm saying is I don't like the way you define the nature of the Indian Republic.
Do you give the Prime Minister credit for any achievements in the last 9 years?
Of course I do.
Which would be his top achievements according to you?
Well, look, they've done a series of reform measures for the economy, which has, I think, created a much firmer base for the country to move forward. There's no question about that. I think on relationship with a lot of major powers, with the United States or Japan or Russia, he has maintained balance. I give him full credit for his response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent global reaction to India. I think India stood firm on what I call a Nehruvian path. In fact, I did a column saying, Narendra Modi's Nehruvianism, right? They may not like it.
Counterintuitive for the BJP.
They may not like it, and a lot of the BJP fellows don't like being reminded of it, but this was Nehru. To say India has a voice of its own at a time when there was so much pressure being brought on India to fall in line with the West. And you had, bhajan mandali of columnists in this country writing how we should all, go with the United States and with the West in supporting Ukraine. But this government stood its ground. And I think that was a great achievement on foreign policy. I think India's standing has certainly gone up in Asia.
Yeah.
Because Asia would like to see another power. If you travel east, all of them do more business with China than they do with us. That's a fact, right? But all of them want a counter to China. And how long will the West be a counter to China? This is where I am a fundamentalist when it comes to Asianism. I think my understanding of Nehru and the entire national movement was that they were defining India within the Asian context. They were saying that, look, here is a country where Buddhism spread across Asia. Came out of India, went into China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, right? Here is a country that has cultural links with the whole region. But conquered by Europe. For 200 years, we were slaves. Now we are once again Asian. And to me, that's an extremely important idea. And, I used to write speeches for Manmohan Singh. And in many of his speeches, I used to put this idea down. When people now say, oh, Narendra Modi coined the phrase Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I say nonsense. It is Indira Gandhi who coined that phrase, actually, when she addressed the Earth Summit in Rio, I think, in 1981. But at least there are a dozen speeches of Manmohan Singh in which there is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and he used to always mispronounce Kutumbakam, being a Punjabi. I remember, our common friend, Vikram Doraiswamy, who's now High Commissioner in London. Vikram used to always tell me, he said, sir, why do you put such complicated words? Boss is not able to pronounce it. But he did. There are so many references to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in Manmohan Singh speeches.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of an Indianness, of an Indian view of the world, of India being part of Asia, is what is important. And we are respected for that in our neighborhood. But if India is seen as an ally of America, and you're desperately buying everything from them and towing their line on Ukraine and towing their line on Taiwan, I don't think the world will respect us. So I give full marks to Narendra Modi on that.
To come back to writing speeches, talk about political communication. What was the toughest crisis for you to manage as a media advisor to Prime Minister Singh?
Well, his inability to speak like a politician.
Yeah.
Right? He was very professorial, always.
Yes.
And he was very earnest. So every speech he would read earnestly, like a good student, who's got a text to read.
Yeah.
We used to have this elocution competition when we were in school, right? As opposed to debating. You are supposed to have ability to speak.
Yeah.
And he was always practicing. But politicians have to be different. That is where Narendra Modi scores, though he's become jaded in the way he speaks now. I think he's become repetitive in many ways. But the most popular prime ministers, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. What a brilliant speaker he was. You're mesmerized listening to him, even if you did not agree with everything. You're just simply mesmerized. I have a story on this. When I was in Times of India, I was editorial page editor and I used to do the edits. So in 95, 96, when Narasimha Rao got elected out and Vajpayee was a 13-day government, we were generally critical of this 13-day government, editorially, saying it was not a legitimate government. So Ashok Jain, who was the chairman of the Bennett Coleman, he called me and said, "Aap kyun itna Vajpayee ji ke khilaf likh rahe?" So I said, "Look, मैं Vajpayee ji के खिलाफ नहीं लिख रहा हूँ. मैं कह रहा हूँ कि the government doesn't have majority. The president should have found out before swearing him. They will be voted out. And they were voted out, right? After 13 days, they were voted out. So he said, "Theek hai." And these were the good old days when publishers did not, force you to say what. Yeah. He just wanted to indicate to me.
Yeah, tone it down, dial it down a bit,
Then came the day when there was the vote of confidence speech.
This is the one vote.
One vote he lost. And you remember that speech. It's still there on YouTube. And I have watched it again and again. One of the most outstanding speeches of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So, few minutes before it, I get a call from the chairman's office saying, "Chairman is calling you." So, I went up. He said, "Baithiye. Atal ji bolne wale hain. Hum mil ke sunenge." So, we had television on, Lok Sabha channel. And he and I heard the Prime Minister defending his government. At the end of the speech, Ashok Jain turns to me and says, "So what is your view?" I said, "Sir, brilliant speech. I mean, he could not have spoken better. What a fantastic. So he says, बस इतना जाके लिखिए ना. आप इतना जाके लिखिए ना. I mean, when I now see the relationship between journalists and owners,
Yes.
the kind of
Unimaginable.
Unimaginable.
But talk about today's media and also the very seemingly paradoxical relationship between Modi and the media. I say seemingly paradoxical because I think Prime Minister Modi at the core of it, because of 2002, because of his belief that the media, the liberal media, was unfair to him. Obviously, the starting point is that. Doesn't like the media, would like a situation where he bypasses the media, and often in his politics he used social media to communicate directly with the voter. When you look at the media landscape today, what do you see?
Well, I've written on this. I think the bigger challenge in my view is self-censorship.
Yes.
Compared to any form of government censorship.
I agree.
I think journalists are... what is that phrase? Are kneeling when asked to bend. Right? I have written freely. Right? I've been censored. I've been censored by The Week magazine. I can say it on record, which did not like something which I wrote, and I've stopped writing for them. I've been advised by other newspapers, why don't you delete this sentence? Why don't you delete that sentence? And on occasion, I've even done that in order to make the larger point which I was making. I said, okay, the one sentence.
And that's happened in every newsroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Under different prime ministers as well.
And under different editors, right?
Different governments as well.
Under different governments. So therefore, I said, all right, But I think I have written a lot of columns critical of the government. Right? Nobody, till now, I have not been punished. Right? Maybe I will at some point, but I don't know. But I think the fact is that if you exercise your freedom, there is space available, right? And there are several websites, there are several people like you, etc., in the media still exercising that space, that freedom, and not yet being raided on or whatever. But I think the fear of media, the self-censorship, which I see, and I'm sorry to use this word, but I often see a lot of idiocy in media. I mean, appalling idiocy. When you see something so visible and you're not willing to tell your viewer that what you're showing is this, how can you be so assume that your viewer is stupid? I mean, I'm seeing a visual and the anchor is not willing to tell me what that visual implies. We're almost hoping, okay, let this visual go. Let's come to the next. That is idiocy. And whether it is out of fear or simple incompetence, I don't know. But I think there's a lot of that in the media.
Do you think it links to, because I kind of agree with you that I don't actually think, I don't know, that it's people in government calling up people and saying, do this story this way. There may be occasions that, by the way, those phone calls have come also again from all governments at all, that I can remember being in the media. And it's how you handle that phone call. Like you said, it's how you handle that phone call. That phone call will come. It's somebody's job to make that phone call, that give a better spin on the story. Do you think that what's happening today in the media links to broken revenue models, links to the fact that you today have big businesses owning most of media, and those big businesses need other things from government, not just the Modi government, they'll need it from tomorrow. If there's a Congress government, they'll need it from them also. What is the reason that we're seeing media like this today, in your opinion?
Well, I think several things are happening. I mean, there is change of habit of consumers of news. The younger generation no longer reads newspapers. It's all on the mobile phone.
Yeah.
The kind of news that they're looking for is changing. So technology is changing, markets are changing, professionalism is changing, the kind of reporting that happens is changing. So there's a complex set of factors. But I want to say something on what you said earlier about every government does something.
I'm just saying that for every government that I have remembered, right, you have got a phone call. I have got a phone call from somebody saying, you're very unfair.
No, in fact, I want to give you a specific example. First of all, the Constitution allows a government to do that, right? Under Article 19(1), there are several factors under which a government can legitimately intervene and ask the media not to report something. So,
national security,
yeah,
communal riots,
and so on. Now, I'll give you a specific example where I, in fact, as media advisor to the Prime Minister, called up the media, including, I would have imagined you, when the head of Dera Sacha Sauda was being arrested. The Home Secretary then came to me and said that, look, we are going to arrest this chap and there's going to be violence because his supporters are going to go out onto the streets. We expect a lot of violence. It would help us if none of this appeared on television to control the violence. So I made phone calls to all the TV channels and nobody showed those visuals. As a result of which, they were able to arrest him without any violence. Of course, subsequently he was released and then subsequently he was re-arrested. I mean, you know the whole story. But I think give that as an example where I regarded making those phone calls, asking for some event not to be shown because of the law and order kind of implications. And I think any government would do that, as you said. But I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is the abuse of journalists who don't listen to you. Because even when I, for example, made those phone calls, I did not then use, somebody did not take my advice, I would leave it at that. But today you have what is called trolling and abuse of people. I mean, you had abuse of Obama. For heaven's sake. One great statesman, a Nobel Prize winning president. We may not like a lot of things that Obama did, but a man who is highly respected, individually respected as a person, apart from being. So that abuse of Obama can take it easy, right? He can brush it off. But a lot of young journalists I know feel threatened by the abuse. So that is the fear, that you're inducing fear in them, which results in self-censorship.
Let's, for one moment, you've spoken from the point of view of journalists. Let's, for one moment, speak from the point of view of government. Not this government, any government. But imagine for a moment you were media advisor to Prime Minister Modi. What would be worrying you today? From the government's point of view. Don't speak from the media's point of view.
Well,
or do you believe their media narratives are quite crafty and where they want them to be smart?
No, I think what would worry me, I mean, as an individual.
No, if you were in this role, if you were in a role to advise the Prime Minister.
In this role, as myself.
Yes.
Not
as you, Dr. Bharat.
Yes, as me in this role.
Same person, yes.
I would worry about the damage that my actions are doing to my country's reputation. I think the one single worry I have with the way in which media is trolled, criticized, attacked, made to appear as if it is in fear, is the fact that I am a great democracy. I have been a great democracy. We used to feel proud of our democracy as Indians. When people compared India with China and said, oh, China is there, India is here, I would say I'm willing to give that gap because of my freedom of speech. Right? That it's and if India as a democracy could grow at an average rate of growth from 1980 to 2020, 40 years, our average rate of growth, let's say, is around 6%. And China's average rate of growth, let's say, maybe around 9%. So I've foregone that 3%. And what have I gained in exchange? I've gained my freedom. So we used to feel proud. I remember when George Bush met Manmohan Singh for the first time. This was in Moscow on the ramparts of the Red Fort. The Kremlin Palace. And this was the June 2005, 50th anniversary of the liberation of Germany by Soviet troops. And Putin had all of the Western leadership there. President Bush was there with Laura Bush. And President Bush came up to Manmohan Singh with Laura Bush and said, Laura, this is Manmohan Singh. He's the Prime Minister of India. And, he's a Sikh, is a turban. And their president is a Muslim. His party president is a Christian. But India is a nation, a majority of Hindus. It's a great country. Manmohan Singh, after that, I was not physically present, but when Dr. Singh came back to the hotel and we met him, he told this to us, that this is what...
Yeah.
You felt proud. You felt proud that the President of the United States looked at you as a plural society. All religions lived in this country. A Sikh could become Prime Minister. A Muslim could become President. And what did it mean? It meant that we were a free democracy. So when that reputation internationally has taken a knocking, it has taken a knocking. Let's not fool ourselves. Even the best of our friends, and I mean it seriously, whether it's the United States political leadership, whether it's the European political leadership, whether it's the Japanese political leadership, the Asian political leadership, South Asian political leadership, you look around the world, there is a feeling that India today, no longer occupies that moral pedestal of being a free nation for all. And that hurts. And I don't see any reason why we should be there. I mean, here is a government that has a majority. Right? So, if you enjoy that popular mandate, enjoy it. Enjoy it and share it with everyone. And allow that freedom, that free speech. Don't abuse people who don't disagree with you. Tell your party, stop this trolling. That joker they have in that IT cell, all kinds of nonsense they tweet. Why? Who benefits from that? You're anyway getting 38% of the vote.
You don't need to.
You don't need to do all
the
this.
troll army. Tell me though about populism as a concept. What is happening in politics is not unique to India. Even the pushback, and you've explored this in one of your books, the pushback against the old elite. This is a global phenomena today. Someone like Trump, who was actually a sort of billionaire insider of New York City, was able to position himself as the outsider and make an entire political career from this idea that there is a liberal elite that has captured culture. These are culture wars. At its heart, these are culture wars, right? And you have explored this idea of the old elite, the Darbar, the Delhi Darbar, what we now call Lutyens Delhi, and so on. We have to also understand our politics in the context of that, don't we?
Well, I think there are two aspects to this. First of all, the Delhi Darbar had become extremely arrogant. It used to be said of France that people outside Paris hate Parisians. Yeah. Because a Parisian thinks he's culturally superior. And I think one of the best books on this whole business of cultural superiority was written by a French scholar. The name doesn't come to me, but very famous classic. And there's no country in the world in which you have the high society and the low society. I mean, the Brits have it, but nowhere near like the French, right? And I think Lutyens Delhi had become that. I've said in my book about myself, I lived the first 30 years of my life in Hyderabad. And when I came to Delhi, because I was in the Times of India, not even when I was in the Economic Times, where I began my journalistic career, but by the time I moved to Times of India, 93, and my fellow Hyderabadi was Prime Minister of the country. So the Delhi elite knew that here is a fellow, he's close to Narasimha Rao. His father is knows Narasimha Rao. So the identification, and I was the edit page editor of Times of India. Yeah. So my job, Times of India edit page, and
proximity
my proximity to a Hyderabadi Prime Minister. I entered the elite circles of Delhi. I started getting invited. The parties, the evening parties, the cocktail parties, the farmhouse parties. And that is when I saw. And look, frankly, they had come to believe that they are the rulers of this country. And I think where Narendra Modi got it right, which is why I titled my book, India's Cultural Revolution, right? Caste, Class and Cultural. Yeah. Where Narendra Modi got it right was to say, I will go after these guys. Because there is an emerging elite. And again, I've written about them, at the state level. the Telugu elite, the Gujarati elite, the Bengali elite, the UP elite, who come to Delhi and feel, I mean, I was a Hyderabadi elite, right?
Yeah.
I come from Banjara Hills of Hyderabad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in Delhi, I was outsider.
Yeah.
So I think he understood this dynamic of an emerging regional elite that he tried to win over against the Lutyens Delhi.
Yeah.
And I think the Lutyens Delhi got a kick in their backside.
But according to you, well-deserved one.
I think it's a well-deserved kick.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, frankly, Bharat Jodo Yatra would not have happened
Had that kick not come.
had that kick not come. I mean, that is where I think whoever advised Rahul Gandhi, he did the right thing. And he went about it in the right way. You know, I sincerely think that was a turning point for him politically. Because he finally came down
To earth.
to earth. You know, he was surrounded by characters. And I know many of the characters who were around him, who told me when my book came out, right? All St. Stephen's, Doon School, Oxford, Cambridge, you know, member of golf club, Delhi Gymkhana Club. This is the crowd that surrounded him.
Yeah.
He then went to Karnataka, Kerala, walked among the ordinary people and declassed himself. You know, the communists have this phrase, you declass yourself. He did declass to an extent, I mean, not 100%. So I think Modi got it right when he targeted this Lutyens Delhi. But I think what I would say today in the 9th year of Narendra Modi is that many of his acolytes are now entering the Lutyens space. They are becoming the new Khan Market gang.
They are becoming what they condemned.
They are becoming what? It's in the law of power, you know, the dynamic of power. You know, you eject those who are in power, come to power. French Revolution is a classic example where the masses came. What is it? Robespierre, you removed the king, beheaded the king, and then you became the dictator, right? So from the French Revolution, you have seen that those who eject the elite then become the elite. And that is happening now. You know, you see, you go to a book function. Like in Delhi, one of the great cultural events is a book launch function. Right? You go to a book launch function and see who's sitting where, who's on the dais. You know, the interactions between the ordinary people, many of whom don't even read books, and those in the front row. The whole culture of a Delhi book launch. You can see the new elite now replacing the old elite. You know, earlier you would have A, B, C being kind of surrounded. Now you have X, Y, Z being surrounded. The people change, but the behavior of the Darbar is always, that is why it's called the Darbar.
When, if ever, have you had a somewhat detailed conversation with the Prime Minister?
With
Modi, Prime Minister Modi.
Only when he was Chief Minister, not as Prime Minister.
Not as Prime
I met him a couple of times, particularly when I was Secretary General of FICCI.
Yeah.
He came for our annual general meeting. And so the only photo, that's not the only photograph. I have two photographs with him. But first one was when he was Chief Minister. I met him in Ahmedabad. I was editor of Business Standard.
Yes.
So as a journalist, I met him. But as a Prime Minister, I have not interacted with him, except at the FICCI AGM.
And if you were to meet him tomorrow, and let's close with that question. If you were to meet him tomorrow, one point you've already made is your feeling about India's reputation on the global stage as a democracy. Is there anything else you would like to say to him? And is there anything else you'd like to understand from him?
I would say to him, sir, I was raised from my childhood as a purest of the pure Brahmins. The consciousness in my head from my grandparents, my parents, we were Brahmins of the Bharadwaj Gotra. We regarded ourselves as superior. And I have evolved intellectually, culturally, to recognize that this system is an abhorrent system of caste, that all humans are equal. I was a member of the Communist Party for 10, 15 years of my life, when we believed in the great slogans of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, fraternity. I grew up believing that this is the strength of India, a society hierarchically structured along caste for thousands of years, hierarchically structured on the ownership of land, feudal, that had become a democracy in which Constitution said all are equal. Why do all Indians no longer feel equal? Why is there this sense of superiority of some against the other? Why have we come to this? And what can you as a popular leader do to reverse this process? Get Hindu society to accept not just the equality of within the Hindu society, that all castes are equal, that all religions are equal. This principle, because that is the foundation of our nation. Really, seriously, I think Obama, when he said, if this communal divide happens, then India can be pulled apart, and he was trolled for saying that. I think what he meant was, you can have at a national level what you are now seeing in Manipur. What is happening in Manipur? Two communities fighting each other.
But I think there was also a sense that the Americans were not on a perch that they could speak from. I mean, look at what happened in Capitol Hill on the 6th of January. Look what's happening with this Supreme Court and
But I don't think Obama
abortion rights.
Denies it about his own country, right?
I know, but can you imagine an Indian Prime Minister making a comment? No, it just doesn't happen.
Why not? We criticize Pakistan for what it is. We do.
Because Pakistan has hurt us directly.
No, forget about hurting us. We criticize them about the nature of their society. Because we feel proud to be a democracy.
Of course.
And we say, what kind of fellows are you? You have had so many military dictators. You are not a democracy, right? We have said that about our other neighbors that are not democracies. So I think democracies globally have this privilege that they can speak freely about other democracies or about other nations. Because you are then practicing what you preach. I am a democratic society. And therefore, when I'm asking you to be a democracy, I'm preaching what I practice. I'm not preaching something I don't practice.
And if you had a similar conversation with the opposition, let's say Mr. Gandhi, what would you say? You told us what you'd say to the Prime Minister. What would you say to Mr. Gandhi?
For the moment, I would say hang on together.
Yeah.
That's
the main challenge.
That's the challenge. Hang on together. That's very, very important. For them to make a dent. I don't know if they can actually come to power.
Yeah.
We don't know, but certainly to make a dent. I think this, as I keep saying again and again, India's strength is its diversity. We had a slogan, unity in diversity. Mm-hmm. It was not an empty slogan. In fact, we grew up imagining that was the basis of our nationhood. It is unity in diversity. But only focusing on unity and not focusing on diversity, in my view, is the weakness of the current regime. Because this regime is calling all the time for national unity in the name of nationalism, without recognizing that this unity is built on the foundations of this diversity. And I think that is what composite culture was about. You take simple example of Hindustani music here. The same raga is sung in Lahore and in Lucknow by Pandit Jasraj and some Khan or the other. It united religions. It was a common inheritance. Why don't we appreciate that? When Manmohan Singh gave Bharat Ratna to Bismillah Khan and Balamurali Krishna, I was so happy. Because Balamurali Krishna is someone I grew up with. Right? All of us from the south, particularly Andhra and Tamil Nadu, we adored Balamurali Krishna. And here was Bismillah Khan, of course, from Maharashtra, but
UP, Varanasi.
Not Bismillah Khan, what am I saying? Bhimsen Joshi.
Yeah, Bhimsen
Joshi and Balamurali
for a moment. Yeah.
Sorry. Bhimsen Joshi and Balamurali. Bhimsen Joshi epitomized Hindustani classical vocal, though he came from Maharashtra. Balamurali and Bhimsen Joshi, that is India.
Yeah.
And I think that is extremely important for us to remind ourselves all the time. Because when I see Manipur, I worry that if this kind of vociferous kind of tendencies impact the rest of India, we'll be in serious trouble.
Well, on that thoughtful note, let's say thank you. Looking forward to your next book. So may you continue to be as prolific as you have been, Sanjay. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you all.